Hey everyone, and welcome to another Marvel Avengers video. Today we're discussing the dev Q&A that came out yesterday, and I'm kind of cautiously optimistic with where this went. There was a lot of interesting things to be said, but at the same time, it was very vague, it was very non-committal, and I understand why that is, and they kind of go into that during the Q&A. But I think this game needs some solid kind of news or announcements to let us kind of know where this game's headed and let us kind of be able to be invested. I feel like right now we're not able to be invested because we aren't sure about where this game's going. So as to not get your hopes up, guys, I do want to say now that there were no dates confirmed for any of the new content that might be coming to the game, Kate Bishop, Hawkeye, etc. Apart from, again, kind of vague suggestions about when. But obviously there's a lot to take from this still and a lot to discuss. I will say this as well. I am only cherry picking. I'm not doing a total review of everything that's in this Q&A because some of the questions honestly were superficial and kind of, they weren't need to know. They were more interest questions about how the story developed as it did, etc. And if you guys want to watch that, of course, feel free. I'll link the Q&A in the description, but we're here to talk about the nitty gritty, the kind of the game-changing questions, the game-changing content, etc. and so on. So what they kind of started with was by reiterating a lot of the stuff that they've kind of talked about before, but I want to run through it still because it bears repeating. So first, they reiterated that the campaign is going to be replayable at some point. It's being tested right now, but they haven't got a date to it. This is a good news as far as I'm concerned. I think with this, we'll be able to kind of test out our characters in a way that we can't right now. You know, you would be able to go into a story mission that isn't necessarily as high stakes as a aim facility, but at the same time, be able to experience something semi-challenging. Also, it means we can kind of relive those cutscenes if we want to, and I think that's just something that should have been in from the base game, just because this is a game that's very beautiful, and I feel like it would be almost a waste if they never did this. So it's good that it's being reaffirmed here. Next, they talked about seasonal events and said that they are 100% committed to doing them. They want them. They've talked about them before, and so they're kind of holding back on that right now, which is understandable, but also frustrating in its own way, because at this point, we're kind of suffering in terms of content and new content and interesting content and reasons to log in. And that's kind of the concern of a lot of players right now. Next, they talked about more story-driven content. They said Tachyon Rift is kind of the first example of how the story content is going to unfold. And they're saying that, you know, with Kate and with Hawkeye and etc. and so on, they're going to kind of expand the story and open new storylines through them. But they also said that they do intend to go back and visit the 6 initial heroes with their own story missions. So we're likely to see perhaps the continuation to the Thor storyline or the Hulk storyline as we progress through later patches. They also wanted to reiterate to us that this is all connected. There is nothing that is being done unintentionally. So everything we're seeing does relate to a grander tapestry, and we should be aware of that when we're playing this content to be able to be ready for what might come next. In extension of this, they said that with this new storyline, especially Kate's as the first of the bunch, we will see new cutscenes, new set pieces, and so on, but to be aware that it's not going to be, you know, necessarily as large as the original campaign, but at the same time, it is going to be a full story. I think this is interesting. I mean, we kind of already knew this, but it's nice to have it reaffirmed. It's not going to be some kind of half-baked conversation that is then irrelevant a moment later. I'm happy about this because story means a lot to me, especially in terms of an Avengers game. But it does feel like it's taking too long, and it feels like Tachyon Rift was not a good example of story continuation, and I hope that that was just a stopgap rather than the way it's going to be besides new character releases. In my opinion, I don't want a new character release to be the only time we're getting new cutscenes on new, bigger storylines. I mean, for example, with Substation Zero, Maria Hill is the only one talking during her cutscene, and it's visible that they didn't want to fork out to have an Avenger be able to react to them because it was a singular cutscene with a singular person. And so there's an issue there where I'm concerned that budgeting might stop them from giving us the full experience at all points, when really that's what we're here for. Next, they talked about expanding heroes in terms of skills, etc. And they said they're committed to furthering customizability for these characters. Now that everyone's kind of got their characters to 50 or got to gear 150, they know how the characters work and they want to be able to push that fantasy further, which I think is great news. I think being able to play these characters in a year's time maybe and still be able to find new ways to play with them is something that's very important. You don't want there to be in a year's time a character that releases that people just instantly want to choose over Captain America because it's Captain America but with a better kit, for example. So that's a good thing to hear. Next, they talked about cross-gen play and basically reaffirmed that that is the case. PS4 can play with PS5 and Xbox One can play with Xbox Series X. And they also reaffirmed backwards compatibility later on for those consoles so that you don't have to rebuy the game. But alongside this, they were asked about cross-platform, and they said it's something they're very much discussing and thinking about. It's something they're very positive towards, but they haven't confirmed it, and it is probably a decent bit away still, which is upsetting considering that a lot of people are still finding it hard, especially on PC as far as I can tell, to find matches and to find people to play with. And so this kind of needs to come sooner rather than later, in my opinion. They were then asked about the addition of new mechanics for the game. They noted that tachyon rifts were a simple example of adding a new mechanic in terms of the timed mechanic and the necessity to collect orbs to kind of keep that time ticking. But they also said that more complex ones will be coming down the line. Again, they kind of gave no information, which it's great to a point to hear, hey, new things are coming and we're working on more complex versions of this and you're going to be interested in this and that. But when it is just a promise and there's no screenshots or no tidbits being given, it's kind of hard, especially after these pushbacks recently, to be like, yeah, I'm excited about this. Obviously it's good news, but it feels like this news should be accompanied with a little bit of information to keep people talking about the game, to keep people invested in the game. And that's my issue right now. I feel like they're delivering on what we want, but they're not showing us that they're delivering on what we want. And so because they're not doing that, people think that they aren't actually doing what we want. And that's the issue. They kind of then talked about new content, specifically because of this slow pace of content drops right now. And Scott Amos, the head of studio, kind of talked about how new bosses will be coming, and they are coming even alongside Kate Bishop. And he told us that Kate Bishop would still be out by the end of 2020, despite her recent pushback. And so we're hoping that's going to be the case. Obviously, I wouldn't put too much faith in that right now. I don't think it's unlikely, but we have had a lot of pushbacks already. And if bugs and stability issues continue to be so prevalent in the game, I could see this potentially being pushed back further or being somehow altered. And I'm kind of concerned as to that. I think the thing is, and this was something I had an issue with Cyberpunk 2077, was that when you push back too many times, and no matter how perfect you want to make something, you start losing goodwill. And I really hope that this is true, that Kate Bishop does come out by the end of 2020. I don't want a situation where goodwill is totally lost, because at that point this game may as well be dead in the water, regardless of how perfect it is. Another question was if we'd ever get a like-for-like comic storyline appearing in the game, and essentially the answer was no. Not in a kind of harsh way, but in a way of we're taking inspiration from the comics, but we are taking our own direction with that. They want to put everything in the Crystal Dynamics lens, so to speak, and so they very much respect and draw from the source material, but they won't be implementing an exact storyline into the game. they then returned to talk about content and about villains and about who we'll be fighting. And they said that obviously right now AIM is still the main bad guy. That is likely to be the way it is for a while yet. But they're working on adding other bosses, other villains over time because as they said themselves, they know we've killed many robots. They then talked about solo play, and they talked about wanting to make sure solo play was as enjoyable as multiplayer. And so they were talking about stuff, for example, like being able to open all of the areas in the game regardless of whether you're Hulk or Widow, etc. Again, they said they haven't got any details yet, which is super frustrating, but the fact that they're working on it is something to be happy about. Going back to an earlier point, it seems that they don't want to do a traditional roadmap in terms of saying this will happen then this, because they're scared almost of dating things. Essentially, they don't want to disappoint us. And whilst I understand that, I think the disappointing thing is more not hearing about things right now. And I think some more transparency, especially in terms of the actual way the game is going, is what will actually help this game get to where it should be. I think continuing to be unready to share information is actually hindering rather than helping, despite disappointment. When someone says that they can't get something out right now, generally people are amenable to that if they've been honest with when that was coming or when that was intended to come initially. Because people can then say, well, we knew it was coming, we wanted them to do it right, they're doing it right, rather than, oh, we didn't know this was coming, we're not interested in the game, and now we're not playing, oh, this thing came out. I think that mindset that they have right now is actually detrimental to them. And if they don't put dates on things, or they don't suggest when things might come out, or they don't give information about the things that are coming out, there's just a disconnect that's not going to go away anytime soon. They then talked about PC stability, which has been a huge issue. A lot of people I know weren't able to properly play the game and have since kind of stopped playing the game because the game just isn't running well on PC. And so they're kind of employing people who are having these issues, most of which probably don't play the game at this point, if we're honest, to reach out to the devs, reach out on the community websites, etc., and let people know what's going on, so that they can do something about it, because they're currently sourcing even outside of the team to be able to get this problem dealt with. The issue is that this is something that is just killing motivation for this game on the PC. That being my platform of choice, it's really disheartening to see. I have no friends who want to play the game anymore, and it's very hard to find the energy myself to play the game when other people can't, like physically can't. And so not only are they losing people who are dealing with these issues, but their friends too. I'm concerned that this is going to become a bigger and bigger issue where PC is essentially left behind, and the rest of the community is essentially on PS4 and Xbox One, or the newer consoles when they come out. To round off, they kind of discussed level variation and touched on Kate's operation being the first of that, new spaces and new arenas to fight in, for example, but that they wanted to say that long term they are looking to add new biomes, new geography, new looks, shapes, sounds, etc. And so this is great. Obviously, I want to be able to see Asgard or Wakanda or other places just generally in the world, maybe the UK or something like that, just something different. This is obviously intended to be a global kind of campaign, as we see by some of the Thor missions, etc. So it would be kind of nice to see more of that rather than, again, as I say, one or two missions. But yeah, guys, that was the end of the Q&A essentially. If you want to discuss what was in the Q&A, guys, please drop a comment below. I'm really excited to see what you guys have to say about this. And if you enjoyed the video, please share, like, and subscribe. Otherwise, guys, as always, you'll find my socials in the description of this video. My Twitter, my Twitch, my Discord, and my Patreon are all there for you guys to look at. In regards to Twitch, I stream 3 nights a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 PM GMT, and I would love to see you guys there. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.